Ladies and gentlemen, here is something that will genuinely blow your mind tonight, and I need you to really hear this. 167,000 people are freezing to death right now. Not in some war zone, not in some failed state in the developing world, in Russia, in Vladimir Putin's Russia, the same Russia that calls itself an energy superpower, the same Russia that supplies gas to half of Europe, the same Russia currently firing cruise missiles at Ukrainian apartment buildings to freeze civilians this winter. And here is the part that should make your jaw hit the floor. The Russian government's official advice to these freezing families: do not plug in your space heaters. Why? Because if too many people try to stay warm at the same time, the entire electrical grid will collapse completely. Let that sink in for a moment. Really think about this. The country with more oil and gas reserves than almost anywhere else on Earth is telling its own citizens that the simple act of trying not to freeze to death might bring down the national power system. This is not a dystopian disaster movie. This is not fiction. This is Russia, tonight, right now, as I am speaking to you. For 2 centuries, Russia had one unbeatable advantage that crushed every invading army: General Winter. That brutal, merciless cold that froze Napoleon's soldiers where they stood, that stopped Hitler's tanks dead in their tracks. Every schoolchild learns that you do not invade Russia in winter because the cold will kill you. Well, tonight I can report that General Winter has switched sides. The cold is no longer protecting Russia. It is exposing decades of rot, corruption, and criminal neglect. And what is unfolding across Siberia right now is the largest infrastructure collapse in modern Russian history. This is the story Vladimir Putin desperately does not want you to see. Let me take you to a city called Angarsk, deep in the Irkutsk region of Siberia. Pull up a map if you need to. This is the industrial heartland of Eastern Russia. A working-class city, a proud city. On December 7th, a steam boiler at thermal power plant number 9 finally died. After 30 years of neglect, 30 years of maintenance budgets being slashed, 30 years of repair money being siphoned off to fund foreign wars and build oligarch palaces and stock Putin's war chest, the equipment simply gave up. It could not take one more day. The temperature that night, minus 32 Celsius. That is 26 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. And 167,000 people suddenly had no heat, no electricity, nothing between them and the killing cold except walls that were quickly turning to ice. The mayor declared a state of emergency. But emergency declarations do not generate heat. They do not restart dead boilers. They do not warm the kindergartens where toddlers are shivering in the dark. Social media inside Russia is erupting with fury. One resident wrote, "Putin brags about Russia being the 4th largest economy in the world. All lies. How can we believe his fairy tales when our children are freezing?" A mother posted, "Adults can survive the cold, but babies? What are we supposed to do with our babies?" Now here is what makes this tragedy even more sickening. The people freezing in these Siberian cities are the same people Vladimir Putin has been bleeding dry to feed his war machine. Irkutsk, Buryatia, Tuva, Yakutia. These regions are poor. They are remote. They have no political voice. When the Kremlin needed bodies for the meat grinder in Ukraine, they came to these communities first. The sons of Moscow oligarchs got university deferments. The sons of Siberian workers got conscription notices. Since 2022, at least 9,000 men from Siberia have been shipped to Ukraine. The death toll from Irkutsk alone, 567 confirmed dead. From Buryatia, 611. 1 in 7 men sent from these regions never came home. So Putin takes their sons, he takes their taxes, he takes their labor, and when temperatures drop to minus 30, he tells them, "Sorry, you cannot use heaters." The cruelty is beyond comprehension. But stay with me because this gets worse. Before I continue, if this reporting is valuable to you, hit subscribe and click the notification bell. This is the coverage mainstream media is not giving you. Your support keeps us going. Now let me tell you about Russia's highways. The Baikal Highway is the main artery connecting eastern and western Russia. It is a lifeline, and right now it has become a frozen death trap. Reports describe traffic jams stretching 100 kilometers. Families with small children trapped in their cars for 3 days. 3 days in minus 30-degree cold. Fuel running out. Food gone. Snowstorm raging. No rescue coming. The government's response? They blame the truck drivers. Of course they did. That is always the playbook with authoritarian regimes. In Putin's Russia, it is always the common people's fault. Never the government that stopped maintaining the roads decades ago. Never the leadership that conscripted every snowplow operator and sent them to dig trenches in Ukraine. And that is the key to understanding this entire catastrophe. It explains everything. Where are the workers who should be fixing these boilers? Where are the crews who should be clearing these roads? Where are the engineers and electricians and plumbers and maintenance teams that any functioning country needs? They are in Ukraine, digging trenches in Avdiivka, fighting in Kursk, or coming home in body bags, in what the Russian military coldly calls Cargo 200. Putin's mobilization has hollowed out Russian society. There is nobody left to keep the country running. In Kazan, the capital of Tatarstan, a city that just hosted a major international summit, the mayor made an astonishing admission. He said, "We know how to host world summits." But one heavy snowfall makes us look like fools who cannot do anything. A major Russian city cannot handle snow. In Russia, in neighboring Ufa, half of all city maintenance jobs are vacant. Over 1,000 positions with no one to fill them. Even Yakutsk, the coldest city on earth, was caught unprepared by September snow. Residents are posting, "Winter surprises our government every single year." So how does a country sitting on the world's largest energy reserves fail to heat its own people? 2 words: neglect and war. Russia's infrastructure was built during the Soviet era in the 1960s and 70s. Those pipes, those boilers, those power plants were designed to last maybe 30 or 40 years at most. They are now 60 years old. For 3 decades, and especially under Putin's rule, Russia chose to patch over problems rather than actually fix them. Band-aids on bullet wounds. The trillions of dollars that flowed in from oil and gas exports went elsewhere. They went to Moscow's gleaming towers and showcase projects, to oligarch mega yachts parked in Monaco, to private jets and palace compounds, and most of all, to the massive war machine meant to rebuild a Russian empire that exists only in Putin's imagination. Today, 40% of Russia's entire budget goes to military spending. 40%. One Kinzhal missile costs enough to replace every failed boiler in Angarsk. 1 month of bombing Ukraine could modernize snow removal for every Russian city. But Putin chose conquest over his own citizens. And now the bill is due. Here is the bitter irony that makes this whole situation almost poetic. Putin has spent the last several months systematically bombing Ukrainian power plants and heating infrastructure, trying desperately to freeze Ukraine into surrender. He wanted Ukrainian families to suffer through winter without electricity, without warmth, without hope. But something remarkable happened. Ukraine adapted. They innovated. They built what energy experts now call generator entrepreneurship. Every cafe, every dental office, every small business, every apartment building now has its own backup power source. They completely decentralized their electrical grid into a resilient network. You can cut the main power line, absolutely, but you cannot stop 1 million individual generators humming away in basements and parking lots across the country. Meanwhile, Russia discovers you cannot destroy another country's infrastructure while yours collapses from neglect. The cold does not recognize borders. General Winter has no loyalty. And right now, General Winter is punishing Russia. Ukraine has also struck back. Since January, at least 13 major Russian refineries have been hit. 40% of Russia's refining capacity is damaged or offline. Oil exports are plummeting. The money Putin needs for war is literally going up in flames. Vladimir Putin dreamed of being remembered as the great leader who restored the Russian Empire to its former glory. He imagined statues in his honor. He imagined history books praising his conquest of Ukraine. Instead, history may well remember him as the leader who let his own people freeze to death in the dark while chasing a delusional fantasy of empire that was never going to happen. The anger building in those icy Siberian apartments tonight is real. The desperation on those frozen highways is real. The rage in communities that sent their sons off to Putin's war and received nothing but cold and darkness and death notices in return is very real. And it all tells one unmistakable story. The center cannot hold. Something fundamental is breaking inside Russia. The cracks are spreading. And General Winter is just getting started. I will continue monitoring this crisis closely and bring you every development. This is the story that will define Russia's winter, and quite possibly its future as a nation. Thank you for watching. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Stay safe out there and stay with us.